Hi, I'm Bev of Bev's Bells, and I'm a certified kettlebell instructor. Today I'm going to be demonstrating a mini workout, pre-workout routine. It's basically just a nice warm-up, and I use this to prepare just before I instruct a kettlebell class. It usually targets most of the major joints and some of the larger muscle groups. I'm going to start with a cat-cow. Wagging the tail, fire hydrant, and this is going to target my spine, especially my thoracic spine, the middle, with flexion, extension, some lateral flexion, as well as some spinal rotation in there. So when you're performing your cat-cow and you're doing the angry cat, you're flexing, you're pressing your hands into the floor, arching your back, vertebrae by vertebrae. Then you're extending your thoracic spine, lowering your belly, lifting your chin, your head facing the opposite wall. Then I would go to neutral and I'm going to do a wag of the tail, so lateral spinal flexion. Then I'm going to do my spinal rotation, so sweeping up, fingers to the ceiling, breathing in and breathing out, sweeping through. Then I would do it on the other side, sweeping up, sweeping through. Then my hip rotation comes into play, which is my fire hydrant. So using my glutes to move my leg, hip rotation, and then the opposite direction, and really exaggerate it. Do it on both sides. And if I added in a little ankle flexion, dorsiflexion, I could even tuck my toes throughout this whole little mini routine here. So again, your cat, angry cat, flexion, extension, neutral, wag, wag, spinal rotation, sweeping through, and the other side, sweeping through, and then hip, internal, external rotations of your hip, and the other side. And I would do this probably about 5 or 6 times to the point where basically I feel that things are much looser and moving quite comfortably. Now, for the ankle, as I was talking about dorsiflexion just a little earlier there when I was tucking my toes, I do have a little bit of an ankle strengthener and also just for increased range of motion. So you can do a couple of different exercises in this one little set here where you're tagging the band underneath your knee. You wrap this nice and tight around your ankle. You're not leaning right on the joint, but you're bending. So you're working your knee, so flexion and extension of your knee, and you're getting a nice groin stretch at the same time, and you're working on your dorsiflexion here. So you're aiming towards having your toes closer to your shin. And you can lean on your thigh if you'd like as you do this exercise. And just make it more dynamic. So forwards and backwards. And just, if you want to stay there, making sure that your heel is always glued to the floor. Knee is tracking right over the middle of the foot. You don't want to pronate, supinate. You want to keep the foot flat, heel down, knee tracking straight center. And ankle dorsiflexion is very important for lunging, squatting, stepping up, down, jumping, of course, otherwise your knees and hips are going to pay the price because your ankles aren't stable enough and they don't have a good range of motion. So then, after we've done both sides of that, we could work into doing a hip flexor, an inner thigh, hamstring kind of a stretch, all kind of again in a bit of a flow. So pinching the glutes, pressing the hip, this hip out and down, getting a big stretch so as all the hip flexor muscles, even a bit of my quad, and then dynamic. I'll just go back into a bit of a hamstring stretch. I have a bit of a bend in my knee, my foot is flexed, and reaching with a flat back. And then just alternating between the two, pressing the hip out and down, and then pushing back for a nice hamstring. If you wanted to pivot and go into a bit of an inner thigh, you could add that into this little mini section of the routine, and then just slowly going between these exercises. Make sure that your foot is flat so you can get a bit of a stretch on the outer side of your ankle as well. And then of course doing that on the other side. So then I would go on to my shoulders, because these joints are, this joint in particular is very important for me when I'm teaching, because I want to make sure that the students are able to have, first of all, full range of motion, but also to be able to pack that shoulder down when you're having a weight overhead. What I mean by that is that the humerus, the top of the shoulder bone there, is in the glenoid socket and nice and packed in, centered, and that way you're not wavering when you have, especially when you have a weight overhead. So I'm going to make sure that my shoulders are nice and mobile, and I'm going to have a band. I'm going to do big sweeps. Make sure that the band is just wide enough to allow you to clear from front to back. If you find that there's a little bit of a sticky spot there where it's kind of tight, I would hang out there and just work through. Do about maybe 10 sweeps front and back. And then that usually really helps to open up not only my shoulders but also my chest. Great. So speaking about your rotator cuff, making sure that the shoulder is centered inside the socket, you can do some nice internal external rotations where you are internally rotating the shoulder and extending the upper back, and then the opposite, making sure that you're moving the arm in the socket, so focus on turning the bicep and not your wrists or your hands. And I would do about 3 full sets of this. And then I would like to focus on my neck, because that can tend to get neglected. So I just do some really simple half circles, so chin to chest, and then looking left and right. And sweeping down, looking left and right. Bring it back to center, doing the same thing. Looking up, half circle, doing that a few times. And then for my cervical spine here, I could take my hands, gently press, tuck the chin, and really stretch that out. That feels really good, making sure that you have a nice tall posture and that you're not leaning over with it. So nice tall posture. That feels really good. For the wrists, I like to do my extensions and flexions as well, because our wrists are, well, very important, especially in kettlebells. You have to have a straight wrist when You have the kettlebell racked, for example, the wrist is straight overhead, the wrist has to be straight and strong. So we're just going to press the fingers towards us and lean back. So we're doing a nice little extension of the wrist. Just be gentle. You don't have to put a lot of pressure. It's more about just extending it back. And then the opposite, flexing. So here you have to be very gentle as well. Not a lot of weight on the wrists. Just rocking gently back and forth. Opening it up. And then I like to do a little bit of wrist finger push-ups. So just going to the knuckle line, back and forth, opening up the hands a bit. And there you have it. That's my little mini warm-up. If I had extra time and I wanted to work a little bit more on my spine, I would do my foam roller for my thoracic spine. And that's really, it's a great one to include if you have a little bit more time. So starting around your rib cage, making sure that your hips are facing forwards, your bum is always on the ground. You're going to be extending your upper back, hands to your ears or overhead if you'd like, and then you're just going to slowly extend it over the foam roller, tap your head to the floor and come up to about this, where your chest, your hips, your shoulders, they're all in line. You don't need to do a crunch. And then you just go slowly back and forth, extending. And then you work your way up the spine, all the way to about just below your cervical spine here. So just around just below the neck there. You don't want to go any lower, higher than that. And I'd say that would be pretty much the end of it. It should take about 5 to 8 minutes to do all of those, maybe, anywhere from 5 to 10 sets of whatever exercises or routines you're doing. And then you've got it. Then you can go on with doing some larger muscle groups, doing more dynamic exercises to warm up that involve whatever kettlebell exercise you're going to be doing. But this is kind of like a basic or fundamental little mini warm-up routine that I like to do. I hope this has helped. I'm Bev of Bev's Bells. You can reach me at www.bevsbells.com. Thank you very much for watching. Take care now. Bye-bye.